As South Africans count down to the general elections next month, let's zoom in on the lived experiences of young people at universities and what their hopes are as the country marks 30 years of democracy. I am joined by Hlamulo Khorommbi, who's the University of Cape Town SRC representative. We're also hoping to be joined by Regan Johnson, who's a Stellenbosch SRC representative. Hlamulo, a pleasure to have you on the program this afternoon. So firstly, reflecting on the theme of 30 years of democracy, what do you see as the most significant challenge for youth empowerment and inclusion as well in South Africa?
Okay, thank you for letting me thank you first for having me here today. So I know when I look into these 30 years of democracy in general, I think since from 1994, as the country has got something which is like a political freedom. But when it comes to the economic freedom, I still think we have not yet reached that stage. I think at this current moment, as a country, we are still having a challenge of gaining an economic freedom, which I think is what we're supposed to have accumulated over these past 8 years. Because from the day that we got a political freedom, I think our main mandate, it was supposed to be pushing to be able to attain an economic freedom. So at this stage, that's why still rich of youth, which is still suffering unemployment, still rich youth, which is not finding any inspiration in any economic issues currently. We are in youth which are not finding any inspiration to any industries or anything. So I think that's the only challenge that we are facing.
So you touch on the issue of high unemployment, especially amongst the youth. But let's talk education as well. It is often considered a cornerstone of democracy. So in light of ongoing challenges in the South African education system, what reforms do you believe are essential to really ensure that all young people have access to quality education?
No, I think at this current stage, quality education is a matter of are you able to pay or not. So by the mere fact that we don't have an economic freedom, those people who maybe they have been privileged enough to have money, those are the ones which are able to access and be able to receive a quality education. Make it, for example, even with the universities. For you to be able to study at universities, you must pay fees. So when you find youth who maybe they come from disadvantaged families where they can't afford to pay fees, as you see how fees have been increasing, how expensive they are, it means now education is a matter of if you are able to afford or not. So which is something which as a country, if we were able to attain economic freedom, we're supposed to be talking about a free education or education which is accessible to all young people in South Africa.
I want to take the comments of President Cyril Ramaphosa, who has highlighted the reduction of poverty and the increase in formal housing as major achievements of the past 30 years. How do you think these changes have shaped the opportunities available to young South Africans, particularly those from historically disadvantaged backgrounds?
I mean, I think I don't see any material conditions which have changed from back then, ever since. Actually, the difference between now and before democracy is a matter of a political freedom that we have. We are only able to vote we are given a freedom to speak. But when it comes to the economic part, I still believe we have not yet even moved an inch. So I don't see any difference from back and now, because the same people who were suffering, the people who didn't have economic freedom before, even now, they are still the same group which does not have the economic freedom.
Let's get into that a bit more, Hlamulo. Human Rights Day commemorates the sacrifices made for the struggle against apartheid in the country. But from your perspective within the SRC, how do you see the legacy of that struggle really influencing the priorities and actions of young leaders today?
I think we must appreciate the sacrifices that they've made. I think the generation, that generation at that time, I think they've identified their own mission, which was to be able to gain the political freedom. And I thought after them, the next generation, what they were supposed to do was to move from what they've attained and see how can they push this struggle forward, which I think after a political freedom, what you must go and fight for is an economic freedom, which currently I think as the country, I don't know if we're failing to identify such a mission, but I think that's supposed to be our generational mission of saying at this current stage, the fight that we are fighting is no longer political freedom. That one was attained by our forefathers or those who came before us who sacrificed for it. Now it's our time now to push, to sacrifice and deal with this mission of ours of being able to attain economic freedom.
Hlamulo, let's get your views regarding the ongoing challenges in really upholding human rights, such as the high crime rates that we are seeing in the country, but also inadequate housing as well. As a student representative, what role do you believe universities can play in really addressing these systematic issues within their communities?
I think, can you repeat your question? You said?
I'm saying when looking at the student environment, of course students don't exist in isolation. They also form part of communities where they're exposed to problems such as a poor housing, if at all. Give us your perspective on what students can do insofar as the role they have to play in their communities.
Yeah, so I think one of the factors that we can say it increases the crime rate is when some youth don't have access to the higher education. So they end up being at home, at the streets, in community, doing nothing. So that thing, it pushes them now to involve themselves into crimes. So I think the university, the role which they can play is to open access to more of young people and give them skills so that they can go back and be able to work or to change their communities. I think that's the role which the university can play. Universities can play.
Let me thank you for your time, Hlamulo. As we draw our discussion to a close, I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to Mr. Khorommbi.